August 12th, 1943. Munda Airfield, New Georgia, Solomon Islands. The heat hung over the shattered coconut groves like a curse. The jungle steamed after the morning rain, every leaf dripping, every exposed patch of soil turning instantly to mud. The air smelled of rot, cordite, and diesel, and far above it all, the throaty drone of American B-24s pulsed like a heartbeat in the sky. An unbroken reminder that the Japanese Empire no longer controlled its own air. Lieutenant Hiroshi Ishida of the Japanese 4th Air Group wiped sweat from his eyelids and crouched beside the battered Type 92 heavy machine gun team that had called him forward. The gunners were soaked to the bone, their helmets streaked with dried clay, their faces tight with the frustration of men who had just emptied belts of ammunition into an enemy position that, by all logic, should not have survived. The corporal in charge gestured toward the American forward bunker 50 paces, ahead, half buried in soil and vegetation, jutting out from the jungle floor like a grey, unnatural boulder. "Lieutenant," the corporal said, "we hit it with a full belt. The armor-piercing rounds sparked off it like stones." He shook his head, bewildered. This position was not here 2 days ago. 2 days. Ishida had been tracking the incremental American advances around Munda since early July, watching them with the cold, analytical eye expected of a technical officer. He was no stranger to American construction methods. He had studied captured CB manuals. He had seen the bunkers they built on Guadalcanal, coral sandbags, coconut logs, roofing tin, the occasional poured concrete emplacement that took weeks of labor and crates of imported cement to complete. But this structure ahead of him, this smooth, dense, grey wall, looked nothing like the crude fieldworks that American infantry usually threw together under fire. The thing looked finished, as if a naval engineer had supervised a full construction battalion for a month, as if steel rebar and cement mixers had been landed on a front line constantly harassed by Japanese mortars, artillery, and nighttime infiltration. Ishida moved closer, stepping carefully over churned mud and discarded ammunition links. The wall's surface bore the star-shaped impact marks of Type 92 bullets' high-velocity, armor-piercing rounds that ordinarily chewed through timber and coral as if through wet paper. Here, the rounds had done nothing, not even a proper chip. He placed his hand against the surface. The bunker was cool, solid, almost polished. "Not coral," he murmured. "Not timber. Not sandbag. This is concrete." His voice carried the disbelief of a man trying to reconcile reality with doctrine. He slipped a small chisel from his pouch and tapped lightly. A fragment broke away, unexpectedly dense, heavy in his palm. He smelled it. Concrete. Yes, but different, harder, finer, more uniform than the coarse mixes he had seen in pre-war construction on Truk or Rabaul. Nothing about it resembled the hurried, improvised concrete the Japanese attempted to pour using coral dust and seawater, mixes that crumbled after a week in the tropical climate. This, whatever this was, looked like something used in pre-war naval fortifications at Yokosuka. Something cured in ovens. Something requiring controlled conditions and specialized aggregates that did not exist on New Georgia, and yet the American perimeter here had moved forward only 48 hours ago. Impossible. He knelt, took out his notebook, and wrote in tight, precise kanji. Americans cannot pour this much concrete on an active front line. The process requires time, dry conditions, and supply quantities not possible under our bombardment. This structure contradicts known American engineering timelines. He paused, staring at the sketch he had drawn of the smooth bunker face. His pencil hovered above the page. A thought flickered, one he dismissed almost immediately. Unless the Americans had found a way to set concrete faster than anything the Japanese possessed. Faster than any civilian method he had studied at the Tokyo Engineering Institute. Faster than the rapid mix naval concretes he had read about in pre-war journals. He tried to shake the idea away. Concrete did not cure in 2 days. It certainly did not cure to this hardness under jungle humidity, monsoon rain, and constant artillery harassment. He closed the notebook sharply. "Corporal," Ishida said, "send runners. I want 2 men carrying this sample to battalion headquarters immediately. Tell them it is to be forwarded to the 4th Air Group Intelligence Section aboard the transport at Vila. Use the sealed courier pouch. The corporal blinked. Sir, this is important? Yes, Ishida said, tightening the strap of his field bag. This bunker should not exist. That means something has changed. Behind him, another B-24 formation rumbled overhead, the sunlight flashing off the silver fuselages. The Americans flew with impunity now. Ishida knew the campaign was turning. Japanese artillery positions had been silenced one by one. Supply lines were stretched to the breaking point. Fuel was scarce. Food, scarcer. And now the Americans were building fortifications that did not match any engineering timeline in the Japanese manuals. He walked around the bunker, tracing the contour where the wall met the earth. The joints were seamless. No sign of hastily stacked sandbags, no wooden frames, no exposed rebar. The entire thing appeared poured, cured, finished. In 48 hours. It was, in every sense, a forensic mystery. One that would ripple through Japanese intelligence channels during the coming months, reaching analysts in Rabaul, logistics officers on Truk, and engineering staff in Tokyo, who would struggle to explain how the United States could suddenly construct, hardened defensive positions faster than the Japanese could mount counterattacks. As Ishida stepped back into the jungle shade, he understood the significance, even if he could not yet articulate it. This bunker was not merely a tactical obstacle, it was a symbol of something far larger, American material science versus Japanese manpower. A silent industrial declaration that the United States could create fortifications in hours, while Japan's army relied on shovels, sweat, and time it no longer possessed. For the first time since arriving in the Solomons, Lieutenant Hiroshi Ishida felt a chill that did not come from the jungle rain. If the Americans could build walls like this in 2 days, then what else could they build that Japan was not prepared for? August 15, 1943, 4th Air Group, Forward Intelligence Tent, Vila Air Station, Kolombangara. The concrete fragment arrived, wrapped in an oiled cloth, carried by 2 exhausted runners who had marched through mud, rain, and artillery shadows for nearly 12 hours. The courier pouch was marked priority rare for anything short of aircraft wreckage, captured maps, or decrypted American codes. Captain Masaru Kanda, engineering specialist attached to the 4th Air Group, unfolded the cloth and frowned before the fragment even touched his palm. It was too dense, too heavy, too perfect. The corporal who delivered it bowed stiffly. From Lieutenant Ishida, sir. Taken from an advanced American bunker near Munda, constructed within 2 days of their advance. 2 days. Kanda lifted the fragment to the lamplight. The surface shimmered slightly where Ishida's chisel had broken it away smooth, uniform, without the pitted texture of coral concrete. The grain was fine enough to suggest a controlled mix, the kind prepared in factories, not jungles. He tapped it against the steel table. It rang. Concrete was not supposed to ring. His throat tightened. Fetch Lieutenant Ishida's full report. Minutes later, he was reading Ishida's calm, methodical handwriting. Americans cannot move this much cement. Our bombardments at Bairoko Harbor confirm their supply lines remain contested. Furthermore, curing concrete in tropical humidity requires at least 1 week to achieve battlefield hardness. This structure achieved resistance to Type 92 heavy machine gun fire within 48 hours. Kanda felt a bead of sweat form under his collar. He had studied civil engineering before the war. He knew the curing cycle of concrete. He knew the chemistry. Portland cement did not reach full structural strength quickly, even under ideal, dry conditions. Add monsoon humidity, poor drainage, and pulverized coral aggregate, and normal concrete took 10 days before it could shrug off rifle fire. This fragment had cured in 2. He touched the surface again, almost reverently. What have the Americans discovered? By dawn the next morning, the sample sat inside a wooden crate, heavily padded, addressed to 8th Area Army Headquarters at Rabaul. Within 72 hours, it was on a transport to Truk aboard the destroyer Amagiri, escorted by two A-60 fighters that guarded it as though it were diplomatic gold. At Truk, Rear Admiral Tsuneo Fukudome, head of the Imperial Japanese Navy's air staff, examined it personally. He was not an engineer, but he understood what hardened fortifications meant for the Solomons campaign. If the Americans could construct bunkers faster than Japan could overrun them, the ground war in the Pacific was already lost. His chief engineer, Commander Jiro Tanabe, ran basic hardness tests, makeshift but revealing. A steel file left no mark, a chisel bounced. Even a blow from a sledgehammer barely dented the edge. Tanabe's report used a phrase uncommon in Japanese military documents. This material should not exist in a combat zone under current American supply and curing limitations. Fukudome exhaled slowly, closed the folder. "What do you think it is?" he asked. Tanabe hesitated. "It is too uniform for field concrete, too smooth for hand-mixed batches. I suspect a synthetic admixture." He lowered his voice. "Something we do not possess." The Admiral's eyes darkened. Synthetic materials, Japan's Achilles heel. The Empire could forge steel, cast gun barrels, refine aircraft fuel from pine roots, but it could not match American chemistry. The United States had DuPont, Alcoa, Union Carbide, and 1,000 laboratories. Japan had laboratories too, but not on that scale, not in those numbers, not with those resources. Could the Americans create such concrete on-site? Fukudome asked. Tanabe shook his head. Impossible. Not without machinery, controlled conditions, or a concentrated curing agent. Fukudome stared at the fragment lying on the table like a piece of the future. "If they can pour bunkers in 2 days," he whispered, "they will dominate every island in the Pacific." By early September 1943, the fragment and accompanying reports were in Tokyo, circulated among experts at the Imperial Navy Technical Bureau. Professor Kenichi Moriyama of the University of Tokyo's engineering faculty examined it under a microscope. His report was blunt. "This is not standard concrete. This is a chemically accelerated composite, likely using an aluminous cement base with rapid-setting agents. The Americans appear to have a portable, field-ready formula capable of curing within hours." He underlined one sentence 3 times. "Japan has no equivalent." The Navy, technical director asked, "How long until we can replicate it?" Moriyama shook his head with quiet embarrassment. "Not during this war." Silence filled the room. The significance was clear. American engineers had solved a problem Japan did not even realize existed. They had created concrete that hardened in hours, not days. Concrete that reached fortress strength practically overnight. Concrete that could be poured under fire, under rain, under jungle humidity. Concrete that was rewriting battlefield mathematics. Late in the month, an internal memorandum circulated among senior staff officers. If Americans can build hardened positions within 48 hours of landing, every island defense must be reconsidered. Speed, not firepower, will determine the outcome. Lieutenant General Kumakichi Harada added in the margin, "This is industrial science applied to warfare. We rely on manpower. They rely on chemistry." The gap was widening. And on New Georgia, Lieutenant Ishida, who had unknowingly triggered the chain of alarm, received a terse reply. "Continue collecting samples. American engineering methods require urgent analysis." He read the message twice, folded it quietly, and looked again toward the vanished American perimeter. The Americans were building walls faster than Japan could tear them down. Fundamental had shifted. And the war, though few yet sensed it, was bending toward American science. September 22, 1943. Munda Airfield Perimeter, New Georgia, United States Army Corps of Engineers, 43rd Seabees. Forward Section Sergeant Thomas Red. Kelleher wiped limestone dust from his eyes as the diesel mixer choked, rattled, and finally settled into a steady growl. Behind him, sweaty engineers with shirts tied around their waists hauled sacks of rapid-set powder toward the pouring frame, while privates shoveled crushed coral into the hopper. The air was thick with humidity, insects, and the smell of curing cement, the smell of American progress. "Clock's running," Lieutenant James McAllister called, raising his wristwatch. "We have less than 90 minutes before the next shelling." "Get that mix down." Kelleher grinned. 90 minutes was an eternity compared to the old days on Guadalcanal, when concrete needed 3 days before 2. It would even think about hardening. But now they had the powder, the grey, dusty miracle that had arrived in unmarked crates on a Navy transport 3 weeks earlier. No labels, no instructions. Just a mimeographed sheet, rapid set composite. Mix 1 part powder, 2 parts aggregate, 1 part fresh water. Working time, 15 minutes. Primary cure, 6 hours. Hardened, 24 to 48 hours. It changed everything. Every man here knew it, even if they did not understand the chemistry behind it. Far down the ravine, a Japanese Type 90 artillery piece cracked like thunder, and a shell burst somewhere near the supply road. No one flinched. New Georgia had been screaming with shrapnel for weeks, but the Seabees kept pouring, because they could pour fast enough now to outrun Japanese fire. Coral aggregate, powder, water mix, pour, smooth, again and again. Within hours, a bunker took shape that looked like something built on a stateside proving ground. Not a steaming, disease-ridden island where men collapsed from fever as often as gunfire. Private Eddie Gonzalez tapped the partially cured wall with a hammer and whistled softly. "Hard as my mother's cast-iron pan," he said. Kelleher laughed. "Harder? Can your mother's pan stop a Jap Type 92? This stuff can." They had tested it 2 days earlier. A captured Japanese machine gun, its tripod dented, its barrel warm had been set 50 yards from the newly poured test wall. Gonzalez fired an entire belt. The rounds sparked, ricocheted, and left nothing but tiny star-shaped blemishes on the surface. No cracks, no crumbling, no penetration. That wall had been poured 20 hours earlier. The men never learned the formula. That was locked behind a small chain of chemical engineers in Washington, in a building with no listed department. But the shipping manifest had given one clue. Composite. Aluminous cement, DuPont. A new kind of cement, born from American. Industrial science was turning the Solomons into an engineering laboratory, where every bunker poured was a field experiment. McAllister said it best that morning. "Boys, this ain't concrete. This is war in powdered form." On the opposite ridge, Lieutenant Hiroshi Ishida crouched behind a fallen palm trunk, binoculars pressed to his eyes. He watched as a squad of Americans moved sandbags and vegetation into place near their new bunker, camouflaging it so effectively that only a trained eye could see the sharp angles beneath the foliage. He timed them. The bunker one he had seen open and exposed just the day before was already complete. Smooth walls, reinforced roof, gun slit angled for defilade fire. He scribbled notes rapidly. "American construction accelerated again," he wrote. "Current estimate, less than 24 hours for a full emplacement." He shifted position as another B-24 formation droned overhead, sunlight glittering off the bomb bay doors. The United States owned the air. And now, terrifyingly, they were beginning to own the ground as well. He moved closer, carefully, using vines and ferns for cover. The Americans had left behind an imprint of wet concrete near the rear of the emplacement. Ishida reached out, pressed his fingertip to it, warm, still curing. He checked his field watch. This bunker had been poured in the last half day. As he examined the wall, he noticed something embedded inside the concrete, tiny flecks of white and grey crystals, mixed perfectly throughout the matrix. Unlike Japanese mixes chunky, uneven, often made with seawater, this American composite was uniform. Everywhere, every inch. He chipped a piece and held it to the light. The fracture sparkled faintly. "Aluminous cement?" he whispered. He had read the term once in an engineering journal. a rare, expensive material used in specialized naval projects before the war. Japan had nothing like it. He felt suddenly small, engineered into irrelevance by a nation that could ship miracles to every island they invaded. That evening, Ishida sent another sample hastily wrapped, marked urgent to regimental command. His accompanying report was harsher than usual. This material is chemically impossible under current Japanese field conditions. We cannot match American curing speed. They are building fortifications faster than we can destroy them. He paused before adding, "This is no longer manpower versus manpower. It is manpower versus chemistry." Back in the American perimeter, a cheer rose as the final roof slab slid into place. Kelleher leaned against a palm stump, wiping sweat from his brow. "That's another one done," he muttered. "Less than a day." "Not bad," McAllister corrected him softly. "Not less than a day, Red. 6 hours. And tomorrow, it'll stop a mortar." Kelleher laughed. "We're building like we've got factories in our pockets." McAllister stared toward the jungle, toward the Japanese positions hidden in the distance. "No," he said quietly. "We're building like a nation that manufactures miracles." And somewhere in that steaming, miserable jungle, Lieutenant Ishida realized the same unsettling truth. Japan was fighting American industry, not American infantry. Concrete was becoming a weapon, and the Americans had just drawn first blood. October 7th, 1943, Bairoko Harbor, New Georgia, Japanese 18th Construction Battalion Forward Engineering Detachment. The rain fell in sheets so dense that even the towering palms blurred into grey pillars. Mud sucked at boots, thunder rolled overhead, and the tropical downpour drummed against abandoned American crates scattered along the shoreline, captured after a brief nighttime raid that had cost Japan 20 men and gained little more than debris. But among that debris lay something that arrested Lieutenant Hiroshi Ishida the moment he saw it. A crate, half buried in mud, stenciled faintly in black English lettering. He crouched beside it, brushed away wet soil, and ran his fingers across the crate seams. The wood was swollen from rain, the nails rusted, but the crate was intact. He tapped it with a knuckle. It thudded solid, heavy. Exactly the kind of weight one would expect from industrial cement bags. Sergeant Nakamura, his engineering assistant, stepped up beside him. "Sir, the Americans left this during their withdrawal last week. We assumed it was damaged food rations." "No," Ishida murmured, heart quickening. "This is what they're using." They pried the lid off with a crowbar. Inside, sealed in thick oiled paper, lay 12 squat bags of grey powder far finer than the coarse Portland cement mixes Ishida knew. The powder clung to his fingertips like ash. Even in the dim light, he saw flecks of something unnatural. Pale crystals, translucent grains, metallic specks. He pinched some between his fingers. Warm. Not from the climate. From chemistry. Nakamura frowned. "Sir, this is not ordinary cement." "Correct." Ishida reached for his notebook, hands trembling with significance. "This is the answer. This is how they build in 48 hours. The captured bags bore no manufacturing details beyond a factory code and a batch number. No instructions. No ingredient list. But the American phrase, rapid set composite, left little doubt. Ishida tore open one bag and poured a small mound onto a slab of driftwood. He lifted a handful, letting the powder sift through his fingers. It felt lighter than hydrated lime, smoother than gypsum, yet somehow denser than coral-based mixes. A chemical smell lingered sharp, metallic, unfamiliar. He motioned to Nakamura. "Prepare a small mixing dish. We test it now." Nakamura blinked. "In this rain, sir?" "Yes," Ishida said. "If it cures under these conditions, then we understand what we are facing." They poured powder into a shell casing, added coral gravel from the shoreline, and mixed in rainwater. The reaction was instant. A faint hiss, a rise in temperature, a smell of ozone and clay. Nakamura recoiled. "Sir, it is heating." Ishida fought to maintain composure, though the heat radiating from the mixture stunned him as well. "Observe," he whispered. After 5 minutes, the mixture thickened. After 10 minutes, it began to harden. After 20 minutes, it was no longer workable. He touched the surface, warm, firm. In the middle of a monsoon, without shelter, without proper tools, the American cement had begun curing faster than Japanese concrete cured in a week. By the time an hour passed, the sample felt like stone. Nakamura whispered what both men were thinking. "Sir, this is impossible." Ishida exhaled slowly. "No. This is industrial chemistry. The Americans have brought laboratories to the jungle." Late that night, under a tarp stretched between two shattered palm trees, Ishida prepared his report for Rabaul. He wrote with precision, the rain pounding overhead like artillery. Captured material confirms Americans possess a chemically accelerated cement mix. Reaction begins within minutes, even in saturated conditions. Curing in less than 1 hour, hardening within 6 hours. Full structural strength within 1 to 2 days. He added, "This compound is superior to any Japanese field construction material. We have no means to replicate it." He boxed the sentence, drawing a thin line around it as if framing a death notice. Outside, the storm intensified. Thunder rattled the crates. Somewhere in the jungle, a lonely Japanese patrol fired a warning shot at shadows. Ishida leaned close to the lantern's glow. If American forces continue employing this material, they can construct hardened bunkers on every beachhead before counterattacks arrive. Our tactics relying on rapid infiltration and close-range assault will fail. For the first time in his IT2 military career, he wrote something he never expected to commit to paper. The war may now be decided by concrete, not by bullets. Several miles away, American Seabees were working through the night as well. On a ridge overlooking Bairoko, Sergeant Kelleher checked another curing slab inside a newly dug gun pit. Solid. Perfect. Ready for use. He slapped the surface and grinned. "This stuff could stop a freight train." Lieutenant McAllister corrected him quietly. "It can stop the Empire." Because every hour saved in construction meant 1 more hour the Japanese could not counterattack. Every bunker poured overnight meant an American squad lived long enough to fight another day. Every slab cured in the rain meant the jungle itself could no longer slow the Allied advance. McAllister looked toward the dark jungle, where Japanese lines hid in the trees. "They still think they're fighting infantry," he murmured. "They don't understand they're fighting chemistry." By dawn, Ishida's report was already en route to Rabaul. By the end of the week, Japanese engineers across the Solomons were demanding answers. By the end of the month, Tokyo would realize what was happening. The Americans had weaponized time. Concrete was no longer a building material. It was strategic acceleration. And for the first time since the war began, Japanese engineers felt something cold settle into their bones. A fear, not of American firepower, but of American science. October 29, 1943, Imperial Japanese Navy Technical Bureau, Tokyo. The conference room smelled faintly of ink, dust, and the faint antiseptic odor of the laboratory down the hall. Ceiling fans pushed warm air in lazy circles. Every man seated around the long cedar table wore an identical expression, fatigue layered upon disbelief. The box containing Lieutenant Ishida's captured rapid-set composite sat in the center of the table like a foreign artifact. The oiled wrapping had been peeled back. A single opened bag lay beside it, the grey powder arranged in a neat pile atop a porcelain laboratory tray. Rear Admiral Takeji Kobayashi folded his hands. "Gentlemen," he said softly, "we are here today because a single American material has accomplished what their bombs, bullets, and marines have not." His gaze swept the room. "It has reached Tokyo uncontested." Commander Jiro Tanabe cleared his throat and stood. He had spent the last 4 days in a laboratory testing the captured powder. His voice, usually measured and patient, carried a tremor. "The Americans are using an aluminous rapid-set cement of a type we have not developed. It reacts aggressively with water, begins curing within minutes, and reaches structural hardness within hours." A captain at the far end of the table frowned. Even in monsoon rain? Tanabe nodded grimly. Especially in rain. Moisture accelerates the reaction. A murmur rippled across the plum room. Admiral Kobayashi tapped a pencil against the folder in front of him. Explain what we are facing. Tanabe opened his notes. This compound contains at least 3 components we cannot synthesize at scale under current conditions. Refined aluminum silicates, calcium aluminate, and a small quantity of industrial accelerants likely derived from American chemical giants such as DuPont. He gestured to the hardened sample on the tray. Observe. This was mixed in the laboratory yesterday afternoon. After 2 hours, it reached 1,000 pounds of compressive strength. After 8 hours, it reached 3,000 pounds. That is comparable to naval fortification-grade concrete. Another officer whispered. Impossible. Tanabe corrected him gently. Not impossible, Admiral. Industrial. Rear Admiral Kobayashi motioned to Professor Kenichi Moriyama, civilian consultant from the University of Tokyo. Moriyama stepped forward, adjusting his wire-rimmed spectacles. His voice was steady, scholarly, devoid of false optimism. Japan's chemical industry cannot replicate this compound during wartime, he said. We lack aluminum reserves, we lack refining capacity, and our laboratories are focused on aviation fuel and naval production. He drew a slow breath. The Americans, however, can manufacture this cement in quantities large enough to supply every marine division in the Pacific. An uncomfortable silence followed, broken only by the drone of the ceiling fan. Kobayashi asked, What does this mean for our island defenses? Moriyama answered without hesitation. It means the Americans can build permanent fortifications faster than we can destroy temporary ones. It means every beach they land on will become a fortress within 2 days. It means infiltration tactics, night assaults, and hasty counterattacks will fail. He paused, then delivered the sentence no one wished to hear. It means our defensive strategy for the Pacific is obsolete. Captain Yano of the Army Engineering Bureau slammed his palm onto the table. Surely we can overwhelm these bunkers with artillery. Or with flame weapons. Tanabe shook his head. We tested the captured sample. It resisted a Type 92 machine gun, resisted chisels, resisted sledgehammers. Its compressive strength rivals that of pre-war naval bases. Anything short of high-caliber artillery will merely chip it, Professor Moriyama added. Artillery cannot be positioned quickly enough on most jungle islands. The Americans pour their bunkers before we can even adjust our firing positions. Another officer muttered, This is how they win, not by bravery, but by science. The room fell silent again. Not by bravery, by science. It was a terrifying thought for a country steeped in warrior tradition. Rear Admiral Kobayashi rose to his feet. His voice, though calm, carried the weight of inevitability. We must revise our doctrine immediately. Walked to the chalkboard and drew a rough map of a jungle shoreline. The enemy lands here. Within 24 hours, they pour a rapid-set bunker. By 48 hours, it is bulletproof. By 72 hours, it is artillery-resistant. He circled the beachhead. That means the window for counterattack is now less than 1 day. Captain Yano swallowed hard. We cannot mobilize battalions that fast. Kobayashi nodded. Which means counterattacks are no longer viable. We must prevent landings entirely. A dark conclusion. The officers exchanged uneasy glances. Preventing landings meant one thing. Japan must fight at the beaches, or not at all. At the far end of the table lay Ishida's handwritten note, delivered with the sample. Americans are no longer building bunkers, they are manufacturing time. Those words hovered over the men like a shadow. Moriyama ran a hand across his tired face. This is not simply a material. It is a philosophy. The Americans have merged chemistry with warfare. They have industrialized field engineering. Tanabe nodded. They have turned concrete into a weapon. Kobayashi closed the folder. Then we must treat it as such. As the meeting adjourned, Kobayashi drafted a priority cable to all Pacific commands. Enemy employs rapid set fortification material. Hardened positions within 24 to 48 hours. Immediate assault post-landing required. Delay equals defeat. He sealed it, knowing even as he pressed the stamp into wax that the warning was arriving too late for many islands and too early for none. Across the Pacific, storms gathered. Battles loomed. And an invisible weapon born in an American chemical plant had just reshaped the entire strategic map. The officers left the room in silence, each carrying the same heavy realization. Japan was no longer just fighting American soldiers, it was fighting American science. And science, unlike armies, did not tire. Bleed. It did not retreat. November 3rd, 1943, southwestern Munda perimeter. New Georgia, 0, 600 hours. The jungle awoke before the sun did cicadas screaming, the wet heat rising from the ground like breath from the earth itself. A thin mist clung to the palms as Sergeant Thomas Red Kelleher knelt beside the new rapid-set bunker and tapped its surface with the butt of his entrenching tool. Still hard, still perfect, still standing only 18 hours after they had poured it. The Seabees had worked through the night under tarps, lanterns, and the roar of distant artillery, troweling smooth the final angles of the firing slit. The concrete emitted a faint warmth as it cured almost alive, as though American chemistry had found a heartbeat. Lieutenant McAllister checked his wristwatch. "Boys, dawn's coming, and the Nips love dawn." Kelleher spat into the dirt. "Good for us. This box can take anything short of a battleship shell." No one had time to reply. A single Japanese knee mortar cracked somewhere in the tree line, its hollow thump the unmistakable warning of a coming attack. Then the jungle erupted. 15 hours. The first wave came screaming from the underbrush infantry of the Japanese 38th Independent Mixed Brigade, rifles raised, bayonets fixed, grenades ready. Their officers had spent the night studying Lieutenant Ishida's captured notes. Convinced the Americans' new bunkers were still too young to be fully hardened. They were wrong. Corporal Joe Miller, manning the Browning in the firing slit, shouted, "Contact front!" The Browning chattered, sending brass cascading into the bunker's interior. Marines in the trenches outside ducked behind fallen palms and sandbags, expecting the concrete to crack under the first impacts. It did not. A Japanese Nambu machine gun opened up from the ridge. Its rounds struck the bunker's face in rapid metallic ticks, faint, insignificant. Miller yelled over the gunfire. "These rounds are bouncing like rain on a barn roof." Outside, Marines exchanged stunned glances. The bunker was shrugging off fire that should have cratered any field emplacement built in less than 2 days. 29 hours. A squad of Japanese engineers rushed forward under covering fire. One carried a satchel charge, several kilograms of explosives wrapped in canvas, with a pull fuse. Sergeant Nakamura, observing from a concealed position farther down the ridge, felt hope rise in his chest. That will do it, he thought. Nothing can survive a properly placed charge. The Japanese engineer hurled the satchel straight into the firing slit. Miller barely had time to duck before the blast ripped across the bunker's facade, sending a geyser of dirt and flame skyward. The ground shook, the interior filled with smoke and dust. Marines outside were thrown backward. For several seconds, nothing existed but ringing ears and drifting ash. Then Kelleher coughed, spat grit, and ran a hand along the inside wall. Unblemished. He blinked once, twice, slapped the concrete. It didn't even flake. Holy, he stopped himself. "Lieutenant, it held." McAllister's voice cracked. "Check the exterior." Kelleher crawled out the rear hatch, heart pounding, expecting to find at least a crater or fracture. There was nothing. Only scorch marks. No cracks, no displacement. The wall looked as solid as when they had poured it. Across the clearing, Lieutenant Hiroshi Ishida watched through binoculars, breath caught in his throat. The satchel charge should have blown out the embrasure, collapsing the entire forward wall. Instead, the American bunker sat like a stone monolith risen from the earth, silent, intact, and utterly unfazed. The infantry officer beside him stammered, "Lieutenant Ishida." That was a full charge. Ishida swallowed. "Yes, and it accomplished nothing." Another officer whispered, "What kind of material is this?" Ishida closed his eyes briefly. "The kind that means we cannot stop them." He scribbled in his notebook. "Rapid set composite withstands close-range explosive force. Satchel charges ineffective. Recommend artillery or complete encirclement. Advise reassessment of all counterattack doctrine." He could not bring himself to add the darker truth. Japan now lacks the time required to break American positions. 0640 hours. A Japanese mortar battery, hearing the fight intensify, lobbed a series of Type 89 high-explosive rounds toward the American perimeter. Shells landed around the bunker in thunderous bursts, sending shards of shrapnel whipping through the clearing. Marines outside flattened themselves behind cover. One corporal shouted, "That's it! No way the bunker holds against that." But when the smoke cleared, it was still standing, completely intact, uncracked, immovable. The roof slab poured only the day before had absorbed direct impacts that would have caved in a traditional log and dirt field bunker. Private Eddie Gonzalez stared, silent. At last he whispered, "We built a battleship out of mud and a miracle mix." McAllister exhaled shakily. "And the Japs just realized they can't break it." 0700 hours. The Japanese infantry, seeing their charges fail, began to falter. Officers shouted. Drummers beat signals. NCOs tried to rally. But morale, already strained by weeks of hunger, sickness, and endless Allied bombing, cracked at the sight of a bunker that refused to die. One soldier threw down his rifle. Another backed away, shaking. A third shouted something Ishida would never forget. "We cannot kill their walls." Within minutes, the attack collapsed. The Seabees evacuated the bunker interior and formed a circle around it, staring up at the soot-darkened walls. McAllister ran his hand over the entry slab. "Gentlemen," he said quietly, "you've just witnessed the world's first overnight fortification survive a full Japanese assault." Kelleher grinned through the grime. "The brass'll love this." "No," McAllister whispered. "This changes the war." He looked out toward the jungle, where the Japanese had withdrawn. "They can still fight us. They can still kill us. But they cannot stop our advance anymore." He tapped the bunker. "This is chemistry, Red. And chemistry just outgunned the Emperor." Strategic implication. That morning, Marine Colonel William Saunders telephoned Division Headquarters. His report was short but revolutionary. New concrete bunkers held against direct infantry assault, grenades, satchel charges, and mortar fire less than 24 hours after pouring. Repeat, 24 hours. Recommend full-scale adoption. On the other end of the line, silence stretched for several seconds before headquarters replied, "If this holds true, the Pacific just became smaller." October 19th, 1943, Munda Defensive Line, New Georgia, United States Navy Seabees, and 1st Marine Raider Battalion. The jungle fell silent only once before dawn, an uncanny stillness that made the hair rise on the back of Sergeant Thomas Kelleher's neck. The cicadas stopped, the fruit bats vanished, even the constant drip of humidity seemed to hold its breath. Lieutenant James McAllister stepped out of the half-finished command pit, wiping sweat and cement residue off his arms. "Red," he said quietly. "Wake every man." Kelleher did not ask why. In the Solomons, the jungle spoke before an attack, and it was speaking loudly now. 5 minutes later, as the first pale smear of morning crept through the canopy, Japanese mortars cracked open the world. Shells fell in volleys, dozens at first, then scores. The treetops exploded into fire and falling leaves, and the air filled with the whistling shriek of shrapnel. Dirt and coral fragments rained down on the Seabees' forward line. Private Eddie Gonzalez dove behind the lip of a curing bunker roof. "Sir, that roof was poured yesterday." McAllister pressed a hand against the concrete slab. It was warm not from curing this time, but from the shock waves of the bombardment. "And today," he said, It had better do its job. A mortar shell struck directly atop the structure. The blast punched dust into the air, but the roof did not crack. To the south, Marine scouts radioed a warning through static. Movement company strength, maybe more closing fast from the riverbank. They never finished. Japanese infantry in faded green stepped from the tree line like figures emerging from smoke. Bayonets glinted. Officers with swords shouted commands. Type 99 rifles fired as the men broke into a charge. Kelleher saw them coming through the haze. Positions! This is it! Let's see what our miracle powder can really do. The Seabees carpenters, electricians, welders, and mechanics more accustomed to tools than rifles took their firing positions alongside a Marine raider platoon. Their bunker line, still curing in places, was about to face its first full test. Machine guns opened from the ports of the new bunkers. American tracers tore through the smoke. Japanese soldiers dropped, rose, charged again. A sergeant of the raider battalion shouted, "Hold your fire till they're in the kill zone, those new walls will take the heat." He was right. Mortar rounds struck the fresh concrete bunkers again and again. The shock waves rolled over the line like waves against a breakwater, but the concrete held. Chips flew, dust sprayed, but the walls stayed intact. A Marine private yelled in disbelief. "These things are barely a day old." Kelleher fired his Garand from the bunker's side aperture. "You think that's the point?" he shouted over the blast of a grenade. "We're fighting with factory science." The first wave faltered under machine gun fire. But the second wave came harder. Special assault teams armed with satchel charges. 2 Japanese soldiers sprinted through the chaos, each holding a cloth-wrapped explosive charge the size of a cooking pot. "Charges!" McAllister shouted. "Stop them!" A raider BAR gunner cut one down, but the second man dove like a swimmer into the bunker's firing pit. His charge detonated against the wall with a concussive thud that knocked several Seabees off their feet. When the smoke cleared, Gonzalez stared in disbelief. The wall had blackened, it had chipped, but it had not breached. "Holy!" he gasped. "Sir, that should have blown a hole big enough to crawl through." McAllister did not respond immediately. He ran his fingers along the cratered surface. Beneath the soot, the concrete was as hard as granite. "This," he said softly, "changes everything." Another satchel team charged the opposite flank. More explosions pounded the blows. Line. Still, the bunkers endured. Japanese officers shouted orders. Riflemen fired desperately at the firing slits, only to see their bullets spark uselessly against curing concrete. One officer, Lieutenant Masao Iritani, watched in confusion as his men hurled grenades that did nothing more than chip dust from the American walls. His adjutant shouted, "Sir, the charges are ineffective." Iritani stared at the bunker as if it were a beast from folklore. "This is not field concrete," he said. "This is naval-grade fortification." He signaled withdrawal. For the first time in the Solomons campaign, a Japanese counterattack had failed not because the Americans shot straighter, but because the Americans built faster. After an hour of combat, the assault collapsed. The jungle swallowed the retreating survivors. Smoke drifted upward, mingling with morning mist. Kelleher slumped against the bunker, chest heaving. "I can't believe it." Gonzalez patted the wall with affection. "These things are newborns, Sarge, and they already take more punishment than our Guadalcanal stuff ever could." A Marine lieutenant approached, wiping grime from his face. "Sergeant," he said, tapping the bunker roof, "I've been in enough fights to know when the tide turns." Kelleher raised an eyebrow. "And this feels like a tide?" "No," the Marine said. "This feels like a dam." From his observation ridge, Lieutenant Hiroshi Ishida saw the withdrawal signal. He lowered his binoculars slowly. His chest tightened. "Impossible," he whispered. The bunkers he had studied, sampled, and warned about bunkers poured less than 2 days earlier had just survived. Artillery, grenades, small arms, satchel charges. He scribbled one line in his notebook. "American concrete now equals a weapon system." Then, after a long pause, he added, Japan currently possesses no countermeasure. When the firing finally ended, McAllister gathered his Seabees beneath the half-scorched bunker roof. "Men," he said, voice hoarse but steady. "Today we held because chemistry beat explosives." Kelleher looked around at the battered but unbroken walls. Not a single breach, not a single collapse, not a single position overrun. In the Solomons, where rain rotted, sandbags and humidity weakened everything, this was a revelation. This was a miracle in powdered form. And every man on that line knew the same truth. The war had just tilted toward the nation that could pour a fortress overnight. October 19th, 1943, Western Perimeter. Munda Airfield, 43rd Naval Construction Battalion Forward Defense Line. The American bunker was only 18 hours old when the first Japanese shells came in. The morning sunlight had barely crested the ridge when a shrill cry echoed from the tree line, followed by the whip-crack report of a Japanese Type 90 artillery piece. The shells screamed overhead and detonated just beyond the new emplacement, showering the worksite with soil, coral, and shredded fronds. Sergeant Thomas, Red Kelleher, spat dust from his mouth. "Well?" he muttered, checking the bunker wall that still smelled faintly of curing cement. "Guess the Japs want to test the merchandise." Lieutenant James McAllister ducked behind the parapet as a second shell landed closer. The concussion rolled through the clearing. But when the debris settled, the bunker still stood solid, eerily smooth, almost polished, its edges sharp, its surface unmarred. "Everyone inside!" McAllister barked. "Positions. This is why we built it." American Marines from the 3rd Raider Battalion sprinted in, diving behind the embrasures and stacking belts of ammunition. Not a single man questioned the structure's readiness. The Seabees had earned a strange, almost mythic reputation among the infantry. If the construction battalion said a wall would hold, it would hold. But even the veterans felt their nerves tighten. This bunker wasn't even 2 days old. Would the miracle concrete actually survive combat? They were about to find out. From the jungle came the shrill whistles of Japanese platoon leaders. A moment later, the underbrush exploded with movement, an entire infantry company emerging like shadows peeling away from the earth. Grenadiers advanced first, lobbed their Type 92 hand grenades in tight arcs. The blasts thundered against the fresh bunker, sending tremors through the structure. Inside, Private Eddie Gonzalez shouted over the din, "Still solid! Didn't even crack!" Japanese rifle fire rattled like rain against a sheet metal roof. Dozens of Arisaka rounds pinged and sparked off the concrete walls, leaving only tiny white dust marks, no penetration, not even shallow chips. Then came the machine guns. A Japanese Type 92 heavy machine gun opened up from a knoll to the north, its armor-piercing rounds hammering the bunker's exterior in a relentless metallic hail. Sergeant Kelleher crouched behind the embrasure, adrenaline flooding his veins. He wanted to flinch at each impact, but he forced himself to watch the wall instead. No dents, no dust plumes, no fractures forming. The miracle composite was passing its first real test. The Japanese infantry closed the distance. 2 soldiers sprinted forward with canvas-wrapped satchel charges, 10 pounds of high explosive, the standard method for reducing American field emplacements. They slapped the charges directly against the fresh wall and dove away. McAllister shouted, "Brace! Down!" The explosion swallowed the bunker in a cloud of smoke and coral dust. The ground shook. The roof vibrated. Tools rattled against the interior walls. For a moment, no one breathed. As the smoke drifted away, Kelleher slowly rose from behind the sandbags, heart thudding. The wall was still there, blackened, scorched, but intact. The blast had gouged a shallow crater only an inch, deep, less damage than what a satchel charge normally inflicted on a timber emplacement. Gonzalez let out a disbelieving laugh. "Sir, you could hit this thing with a battleship and it'd shrug." McAllister exhaled. Not quite, but close enough. Outside, the Japanese assault stalled as officers realized something was wrong. These Americans were not supposed to be fortified yet. Their bunkers were not supposed to exist this early. And certainly not supposed to withstand direct explosives. Yet here the structure stood only partially cured, yet already resisting everything the Japanese could throw at it. One officer, Lieutenant Nakamura of the Japanese 38th Infantry Regiment, shouted frantically, "Kareru! Kareru! Fall back! Withdraw!" It was the first time many of his men had ever heard him call a retreat. Private Paul Merriman, manning a Browning automatic rifle, looked over at the concrete wall still steaming from the blast. "Hey, Red," he said to Kelleher. "When do you boys build this thing?" Kelleher wiped grime from his forehead. "Yesterday morning." "Yesterday?" Merriman's voice cracked. "You built a bunker yesterday, and it just ate a satchel charge." Kelleher grinned. "That's the idea." Merriman whistled low. "Hell, you Seabees aren't engineers. You're magicians." Behind them, Corporal Joseph Burke hefted a belt of ammunition onto the machine gun mount. "Not magicians," he said. "Chemists." From the shadowed jungle, Lieutenant Nakamura watched the Americans pour fire from an emplacement that should have been a pile of rubble. He scribbled rapidly in his notebook. "Explosives, ineffective. Concrete appears hardened in less than 1 day. Enemy can establish permanent fortifications faster than we can counterattack. Immediate revision of tactics required." He underlined one phrase 3 times. "This material changes the battlefield." As he pulled his men back toward the tree line, the truth settled over him like the humid air. Japan no longer possessed time as a weapon. The Americans had stolen it, converted it into concrete walls that grew from soil faster than bullets could tear them down. At sunset, the firing finally ceased. The Japanese assault had melted back into the jungle. The Americans had held the line with minimal casualties. McAllister stepped outside, running his hand along the scorched but unbroken wall. "This," he murmured, "changes everything." Kelleher nodded. "We build in a day. They attack too late." "And tomorrow," McAllister said, "this wall will be twice as hard." The Marines gathered around the bunker, staring in equal parts awe and disbelief. None of them knew the chemistry. None knew the industrial genius behind the miracle powder. None knew its true name. But every man understood one thing: a fortification that could rise overnight and survive artillery was not a structure, it was a weapon. And the Americans had just deployed it.